Hello everyone and welcome back to Nagash channel dedicated to Sigmar, and in this video we're going to be talking about why play Flesh Eater Courts, and joining me on this video is going to be Monty. How you doing, mate?
Hello, I'm doing lovely.
Fantastic. So Monty is a Flesh Eater Court player, and as you can see from the poll that I put up a little while ago, Flesh Eater Courts won the why play army video, so I decided why not start doing it as soon as possible to get out to you guys. So like we've done in the other videos, what we're basically going to be talking about is Flesh Eater Courts. Who are they firstly? We'll basically be talking about their strengths and weaknesses during this video, and overall if you should play them. So Flesh Eater Courts, what I will say first of all, and I'll put this description of, well, I've put a link in the description for the playlist of Flesh Eater Courts that I've already done on the channel, which is about 60 hours worth of the updated stuff, so you guys can get to. If I can be clever enough / bothered enough, I will also do a Pachow moment, and you'll see it in the top screen, maybe, if that's how YouTube works these days. So so yeah, if you want more information, essentially, like lore and all that, and I've actually done a review of every single unit in the army, check that out. This is more of an overall thing if you should play it. So with all the pre-rambling out of the way, let's get down to the main rambling. So for a bit of a summary, Monty, who are the Flesh Eater Courts? What's their lore?
Here we go. So, the lore of the Flesh Eater Courts. The Flesh Eater Courts are an army of great noble kings and organized armies who travel the many realms, bringing justice to the lands. Or so they think. The Flesh Eater Courts are actually a bunch of delusional cannibals who believe this, but actually run around murdering everyone, eating flesh, all of this good stuff. They're all crazy, essentially.
But they believe they're doing the right thing.
They do, yeah. I've been rereading the Battle Tome recently, and there's just one paragraph from the start, which, do you mind if I quickly read? Because I think this is just a nice little summary of the gist
Absolutely,
of
crack
them.
on, mate.
So the paragraph reads, "Wherever the flesh eaters gather, the air quickly grows thick with the reek of decaying meat, and the ground becomes littered with filth-encrusted bones. Yet the Mordants do not see themselves as grotesque wretches. In their madness they are instead gallant soldiers and noble knights, marching out in full regalia to conquer the wicked and rid the lands of evil. Born from the twisted mind of their aberrant kings, this sorcerous delusion stays with them even as they rip the flesh from their enemies' bones with bare teeth." So that's the general idea of the Flesh Eater Courts.
It's absolutely great. You know, and the thing that's also great about it, they just take from our own history as well, which I really like. And it's just one of those fluffy armies, isn't it? You know, the fluff in terms of lore. If you really do like lore, and on a sort of, you know, a comic side, as what you've just said, it's for me alone, it was an army for me. Like, I obviously love everything to do with death, in the hobby, not in general, because that would make me sound like someone with no morals and a horrible monster, which I am great at my emotions, so I'm not one of those people. But one of the reasons why I did Flesh Eater Courts was just because I fell in love with the lore. I love the idea of there's just this the parallel in between them, where the Flesh Eater Courts, you know, like obviously, like you said, they feel like they are knights in shining armor, here to save the day, you know, here to save a kingdom from a conqueror besieging its walls, and they are actually the conquerors besieging the walls of the kingdom they went to save. That sort of thing. What's also quite cool is that the Flesh Eater Courts, the citizens, if you like, of the Flesh Eater Courts, they get they'll be thinking that they're, you know, like having a great feast and all those sort of thing at a, you know, like in a kingdom's hall with the king and everything. You know, they're eating some, you know, like, you know, chicken, you know, this sort of medieval feast we like to think about. And then they'll get a flashback, or not even a flashback, but just like a flash of reality, and it turns out they're actually like got, I don't know, like a man's arm in their hand, and they're just like taking bites and eating it, and then they'll flash back to thinking that they're in this medieval hall having a fantastic feast, you know, of all these like medieval like bands in the background, la da 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 da, which is and what I really like about Flesh Eater Courts, they really fit into my sort of like state of mental well-being, which I think it really relates to me. How do you think about them?
Well, adore their whole crazy believing their knights and kings. There's the whole joke that the Flesh Eater courts are actually the remnants of Britonia. But I also quite like that, even though they're part of the Death faction, they can be quite independent. There are some Flesh Eater courts kings who ally themselves with Nagash, but also quite a few do everything they can to get away from him. So there's this interesting balance, I suppose, dichotomy. I'm not sure if that's the right use of the word, within the faction of, on one hand, being with Nagash, but also running away from him, and disliking him as well. So there's some really interesting moments with that, because they will fight other Death armies. They don't care. They go around following battles, essentially eating the meat and flesh left on the ground after any grand battle. So it's very fluffy to think about, particularly at the moment with the whole new expansion, with all these big battles going on. All of these mighty armies just being followed by these war bands of flesh eaters as they come in and clean up the battlefields afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like what you're saying, how they like to get away from Nagash, was quite interesting, because when we like to think of Death, Nagash, the Lord of Undeath, he, you'd think, well, he's in control of everything. Flesh Eater courts are kind of rebellious, and the interesting thing about them is the majority of units in the Flesh Eater court army aren't actually undead. They're essentially, for example, in our world, if you become a cannibal, it's a life choice. I can't stop you if you believe in that sort of thing. That's absolutely fair enough. However, if you are a cannibal, firstly, that's not a good thing. But you tend to go a bit mentally unstable. And you were mentally unstable before you started eating people, or that if you weren't, I think that makes it worse. What happens in Warhammer, in particular Warhammer Age of Sigmar, if you're a cannibal, it starts to sort of warp you a bit more physically as well, and then the next thing you know, you've drunk a bit of vampire blood, and then suddenly you think, oh, this is amazing, I drank from this cup and now I've got a Pegasus. Well, actually turns out you're a Crypt Flare. And it's so not all the units, not all the creatures in the Flesh Eater court army are actually dead. It's quite for a Death faction, it's quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I think this is like one of the things that drew me to them, because at the time I really liked some of the Death Rattle stuff, some of the skeleton models, but I wasn't quite convinced with it. And I was just looking at models, and I saw the Terrorgeist, which I know we're both fans of the Terrorgeist, and we'll get more onto the Terrorgeist later in the Start Collecting box. Yeah, and that won me over. Just the big rotting dragon in the Start Collecting box. I
just wish the Terrorgeist was actually worth taking to games. So that's essentially who the Flesh Eater courts are. Basically a Terrorgeist. And then the next thing I was going to say is what attracted you to the army. You pretty much said it there. Just like the Terrorgeist is, for example, I have in my collection, I've got a few zombie dragons and Terrorgeist, and I love the natural pose of the Terrorgeist climbing down those rocks. But for some reason, I've never built it like that. My first Terrorgeist, I decided to buy two and put them together and have like a diorama thing going on, and then take a Sylvaneth Wildwood as its base and try and move it around a tournament table at Warhammer World, which was quite funny. I managed to trigger quite a few people during that. You might want to think about putting it on a smaller base. I was like, I'm fine, thank you, until Games Workshop enforced that. During the game, they made me clip it off and put it on a smaller base, which they kindly provided me to buy for. I'm joking. But, so, the Terrorgeist natural pose is great. It is, and the zombie dragon's awesome as well, but I just think a huge undead bat is pretty cool.
You can't quite beat it. It's such a cool kit.
Yeah, it is. I almost wish there was a Terrorgeist with I don't know, it hadn't died yet. If you sort of see why come,
Mm.
you know, like those
Building up a fleshy Terrorgeist.
yeah, a massive vampire bat, I think would be awesome.
Mm.
But not that we're going to see that, but it'd be quite cool. So yeah, that's what attracted me, well, and yourself to the arm, and you know their lore massively, because like me and well, you did it just before the book came out.
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah. So
was that before? Did you know that a new book was going to come out, or
no, it was literally. So I think I got my start collecting box the week before we found out about all the new fleshy stuff and carrying the Empire and all of that. So it was completely coincidental. I was just looking to start a new army because at the time I only had my Seraphon, and I decided on this. And then a week later, it was getting tons of updates and tons of cool new stuff. And at the time, I was like, because my flesh eaters there sort of themed around they're running through a village and tearing it apart. So a bunch of them are on like cobblestone paths on their bases. I was like halfway through building them all when all of these announcements came out, which only made me happier with my choice of what army to start.
yeah, you really should made the right choice. And I've been doing the army for about 4-5 years, essentially whenever it first came out, the first battle tome. So me and you, a few years apart, but we both went into the army before it became a, shall we say, a competitive army. Yeah, before it became a meta army, when it was very much like, I remember when I was taking it to tournaments like 3-4 years ago, something like that, and it would be a tournament of like 130 people, and it would be me and 2 other Flesh Eater Court players there. And then just to think of, imagine that at this day, and it's like, and we would all be running like similar lists, which would just be loads of crit flares, which has obviously changed somewhat lately. But no, so it is, and so we got into it before the army was good, and now the army is a solid army, so there's even more reasons to do it. What would you say the army is like on the table? What would you say its strengths are?
I mean, to an extent, it can be anything you want it to be. Because the Flesh Eater Courts it's a very limited range. There's all of, I think, 5 kits, 3 of which are included in the start collecting box. The other 2 is the Arch-Regent, which is coming out on its own shortly, and the Vargulf. And from the 3 kits, the Terrorgeist, the Ghouls, and the Horrors/Flayers, that's the entire range. But out of pretty much every unit, you can build a competitive list. So you can do a lot with them. As I've seen armies do really well with a bunch of Crypt Horrors. I like playing with a bunch of Crypt Ghouls. You can play with a bunch of Terrorgeists. All of these are very strong in melee. Generally, the army is a very melee focused army.
Yeah, could. I was just gonna say, like, if you looked at 4 of the War Scrolls for Flesh Eater Courts, they have missile weapons, but I'm just gonna say Flesh Eater Courts are not a missile army. They're not a shooting army. Their attacks do look quite good, but they all do rely on your enemy's bravery, bar the zombie dragon or the crit flare courtier.
Yeah, and I was going to get onto it in the weakness. The weakness is the range. It's not as much a problem in Age of Sigmar because it's a mostly melee game. But when so many things now are bravery 10, Seraphon, demons, tons of things is bravery 10 now. Bravery has become a very small part of the game, and when most of their ranged attacks focus on bravery, generally you're only doing a small amount of wounds with the range. So you want to try and get into melee as quick as you can. And fortunately, they have many ways of doing this. So it's not too bad, and they've got some really good ways of surviving on the way up. So as long as you get into melee, they shred.
Yeah, they have. Well, if we were to talk about let's talk about the Terrorgeist, because inevitably we will be talking about that, and it's. I'm not going to say it's not broken. Sinesh showed us things can be more broken, and then Zeech even more so, surprisingly, and then you even sort of forgot about Petroflip Elite happened in between. So that basically the Terrorgeist. The main thing about the Terrorgeist, okay, it has 4 attacks with its maw, okay, so it's big mouth.
3, isn't it? 3 attacks.
3 attacks. Sorry, I'm just so used to putting that bloody spell on from just a standard Ghoul King. So yeah, 3 attacks even. So 3 attacks with its mouth, with its maw. You have a Arch-Regent, give it D3 extra attacks, which luckily enough turns out you get 3 extra attacks. So now it makes 6 attacks with its maw. And then there is a command ability all Flesh Eater Courts have. It's called... what's it called again? It's not Feast Day. What's it called? The command ability to make things bind and attack twice.
Yeah, Feast Day.
Is it Feast Day?
Yeah, command... Or, no, that's the... That's the command... That's the thing that lets you use it for free.
That's the delusion.
Ferocious Hunger, I think it's called. Is it? Let me get it up here.
It's literally the most powerful thing to happen in the entire army. I haven't played Flesh Eater Courts for a few weeks.
Feeding Frenzy.
Feeding Frenzy. That's it. Such an easy thing to remember, you'd think. Anyway, so Feeding Frenzy allows you to pick a Flesh Eater Court unit that is within 12 inches of a hero, or wholly within 12 inches, or wholly within 18 inches of a general Flesh Eater Court hero. So obviously, if it's a Ghoul King or Terrorgeist, he's always going to be in range of himself. So this Terrorgeist, what was making 3 attacks, you gave it D3 extra attacks. At most, you've given it 3 extra, so that is 6 attacks. But it's going to pile in and attack twice, and that's immediately after the first time it attacks. So basically, it makes 12 attacks with its maw at that point. And every 6 you get to hit with that maw is 6 mortal wounds. That's sort of in a nutshell, that is what makes this Terrorgeist so powerful.
You can also combat that with the mount trait, which is it?
The reroll hit rolls for its maw, yeah?
Yeah, and there's also something you can give it where if it hits on a 6, then you make another attack.
If you go Gristlegore.
I think there's a few ways, but it's... so if it's your Warlord, you can give it the command trait. If it hits on a 6, then it inflicts 2 hits. And the first hit obviously becomes the mortal wounds, and then the second one is becoming another hit. So then you can get another D6 potential wounds out of it from this attack. So those base 6 doubled to 12, all of those could potentially double to 24. Yeah.
It's a big beastie.
It's the Terrorgeist is, for me, I auto take 2 in a 2K list.
Yeah, it's the thing with the Terrorgeist is like I say, I've been playing Flesh Eater Courts for years, right? And then when I got back into trying to go to tournaments again, which was like the end of last year, I went for a list that I hadn't really been playing competitively in second edition at that point, not too much, especially tournaments. So I took a Flesh Eater Court list to a tournament that was very different to the meta and essentially didn't do well at all. And then I went to a tournament the following weekend, and after speaking to a few Flesh Eater Court players in that tournament, I was like, right, I'm going to change up my list. And I took 2 Terrorgeists, with Ghoul Kings on, a Ghoul King on a Zombie Dragon, Arch-Regent, and a few units of Ghouls. And I did extremely better. And then from that moment on, it's been the Terrorgeists are just too good not to take. And then quite simply, one is not enough in 2000, like you said.
I played a game where I brought 3 of those and 1 Arch-Regent. And it was a 3-way 2K game versus Beastclaw Raiders and Nurgle. And I essentially put my 3 Terrorgeists into the Beastclaw Raiders and the rest of my army up the board towards the Nurgle. And for the 2k of Beastclaw Raiders, the 3 Terrorgeists alone killed all except for an Iceclaw Raider and its Frost Wolves or whatever. And I only lost 1 Terrorgeist from that. So that's, that comes to maybe 1,300 versus roundabouts 2k points. And I won and only lost 1.
Yeah, it's what I found when I took my Fleshy Courts with the Terrorgeist. And just to say, so you might have heard, if you're watching this, you might have heard a lot of people refer to Gristlegore, which is one of the Grand Courts. So it's actually basically one of the sub-allegiances within the Fleshy Court army that sort of focuses on taking Terrorgeist as zombie dragons, and that's what people naturally lean towards because there are benefits in there. However, when I've taken them, I haven't gone with a Grand Court, so that means I get to pick a different allegiance ability, which is Feast Day. So that lets me do Feeding Frenzy once per turn for free. That's not once per battle round, that's once per turn. So essentially, and when I say for free, it's a command ability, so I'm not having to spend a command point. So what that lets me do is every turn, one of my Terrorgeists attacks twice, and immediately after it attacks the first time. So it doubles all of its attacks. That's essentially what it needs me to do. The benefit, then it's just doubling all my attacks, is essentially if it kills the first thing it's fighting against, which it probably will, it can pile in and do it again, the something else. And I had, when I took this to tournament, one of my Terrorgeists went toe-to-toe with Archaon and killed Archaon on full health. This is before the new Slaves of Darkness book. That wouldn't have really made much of a difference. So a Terrorgeist managed to kill Archaon on full health.
Terrorgeist can put out some mean damage. Really, really mean damage.
And what I would say about the Terrorgeist is with the mount trait, you can only give one of the Terrorgeists the mount trait. And bear in mind, you do have to have your... Actually, I don't know if you need to have someone riding it for just that, but for the Feeding Frenzy, you need to have someone riding basically a Terrorgeist to guarantee it getting off.
Yeah, so all of...
So I was just going to say, just to finish...
All of the...
Sorry, I was just going to say, what you were saying, why Terrorgeists are so good, I was going to say, when you do give it a mount trait, and you give it the, is it the Ghastly Maw or something, to let it re-roll its hit rolls with its Maw, it just... Gruesome Bite, that's it. It just makes the Terrorgeist become such a reliable unit.
Yeah, it's... I mean, when I said all of the Terrorgeists I've been referring to have been Aberrant Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, just for clarity. And when I took 3, I think ever since I've only really taken 2 because it's a bit diminishing beyond 2 because only 1 is getting these benefits, all of that. But 2 is still really strong.
Yeah, the reason why I went for 2 and a zombie dragon with a Ghoul King on top is because the Ghoul King's spell on top of his zombie dragon, which I think is called Ferocious Hunger, allows Fleshy Court units, I think wholly within 16, maybe wholly within 12, but I think 16, of that zombie dragon can reroll failed wound rolls. So essentially, the reason I brought that zombie dragon with a Ghoul King on top is to just make the Terrorgeist even more reliable and better.
Yeah, Malefic Hunger.
Malefic Hunger, that's the one.
Casting of 6 until your next hero phase. Reroll wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by friendly Fleshy Courts units within 16.
Yeah. Is it wholly within? It is.
Wholly within 16.
So that, for example, just meant... So like my general who had the double gang of cloak on as well, so it was like once per game, essentially, it was like, if it got into combat something you didn't want to, or I had to make a decisive charge, it was like, my Terrorgeist is not going to die this turn. Because the double gang of cloak, you have to announce at the start of your combat phase, it's an artifact from the malign sorcery. It allows your Terrorgeist to attack before the enemy tries to attack it, essentially. And what that meant is that I could make this Terrorgeist that, when it needed to, it fought first. It could pile in attack twice. It I say guarantee. I did my best to give it as many extra attacks as possible. It's re-rolling all failed hit rolls for its Maw, and now it's going to be re-rolling its failed wound rolls. Because even if you don't get those 6s to hit with the Maw, and this say you just wounded and the enemy has to save against it, it's still going to be a -2 rend d6 damage.
Yeah, it's wounding on threes, so it's wounding well. It's
Yeah,
like good wounding.
and with the
Um,
reroll, you're almost guaranteed.
yeah, and as you were saying about if you wanted it to attack before then, you can even feast day then because it's just once per turn. You can use it whenever, and it's just after it fights for the first time. So you could even get it attacking twice before they do, and it really hurts.
It truly does, and like what I also did in the tournaments, because also when you're taking like two Terrorgeist on my list and the Vampire on Zombie Dragon, but the Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon, and then like basically 3 units of 10 Ghouls and an Arch-Regent, and that's basically you're covered. What that allowed me to do is, like I said, I was getting one Feeding Frenzy for free per turn. Because I had so few units on the boards, and my units that were important to me were my Terrorgeists, that meant that I will often using the one command point I got per turn on Feeding Frenzy from other Terrorgeists. So I sort of was always making both my Terrorgeists attack twice in a turn. So instead of that, it doesn't exactly make it the same, but it's almost like having 4 Terrorgeists attacking.
Yeah. Now you might be thinking, these Terrorgeists sure sound great. Are they the only good thing in the army? Do we want to go on to the next HQ yet, or do you want me to talk about Crypt Ghouls? Because I can make good points for both.
We'll talk about the next HQ. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like we're basically making this thing sound amazing, and it is. It's a solid, good. People who have had very bad memories against these things would probably quite happily say they're broken, but I just think that they're not over point costed, shall we say. But the reason we've talked about this unit for so long is because we have to. Because when most people fight against Flesh-Eater Courts or play Flesh-Eater Courts, the most common unit to come up with in the army, bar the Arch-Regent, is going to be the Terrorgeist. So we just had to cover that in good detail. So yeah, take us away with the Arch-Regent.
Yeah, so the Arch-Regent is probably the best value HQ, I would say, in the army. So this guy, I sit 2 of them at the back of the board on my Carnal Throne um, until I've used their ability. Their ability is just one of the things that makes them really good. We'll get into the whole thing, but I like to start with the ability. Their ability, essentially, once per game, you can summon either one courtier, so that's one of any of the HQs that isn't a Ghoul King, pretty much. 3 knights, so that's horrors or flayers, or 20 serfs, so these are ghouls. Now, Arch-Regent is 240 points, and 200 ghouls is 200 points. So if you're summoning ghouls with them, the effective cost of this Arch-Regent is only 40 points.
For a double class wizard.
Yeah, so this is a level 2 wizard with the spell Ferocious Hunger. Was mentioned earlier, and we've been talking about with adding attacks. So you can pick a friendly unit, any unit, wholly within 24 inches, and roll it and add D3 attacks. And this goes off on a 6. So this is an easy cast, add D3 attacks. And this is until the next hero phase. So, if they're fighting back as well, if you have a Terrorgeist and you feast day in both your turn and their turn with it, that's essentially that one Terrorgeist attacking 4 times, so an extra D3 attacks each of those times. That's a lot of extra attacks, and you can use this on ghouls to buff the hell out of ghouls, which I'll get onto when I'm talking about ghouls. But even on their own, they stand strong. Like saving on 4s, 7 wounds, healing 3 wounds a turn. They have 7 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s with -1 rend, and just 1 damage. But it's a really strong unit. For so cheap, it really pulls weight.
He really is, and it's almost a bit comical. It's almost just like you think the Ghoul King's quite good with his making a unit get an extra attack and then bringing on like 10 ghouls onto the board edge. This is his big brother. It's kind of like that. The Arch-Regent is, I would say just as much as the Abhorrent Ghoul King on Terrorgeist is an auto include in your army. If you've got to have at least one of these, and I can hear what you're saying, like something we mentioned earlier that it's not currently available to buy separately, and then unless you want to go on eBay and then just get people who are charging ridiculous amounts of money of these things and trying to make some profit because they haven't got any souls. What you can do is just make your own. I made my own one, just base it around similar to what it is. I made my own one out of a horror. And gave it some like wings on its arms and all that sort of thing. I also gave it a massive banner so it can be shot from miles away. Just convert your own. There's not going to be, there's no reasonable person is going to deny you being able to use a converter model for this because you can't currently buy it separately.
And if it's not far off being sold individually, GW's announced that it's coming. And I think we were talking about it, and we figured it'd be around 25 quid.
Yeah, it's $30 I believe. I saw basically I don't know if you saw the same thing I did, but Spiky Bits put up an article and on that it said $30, and that's also the same for the other heroes you got from the other box sets. Some of them a little bit different in pricing, but they will become available as well. Yeah,
so for those of you that don't want to convert it, and it is a really nice model, so for those of you that just want the model, it's coming. And some people wanted it cheaper, but to be honest, recently coming out have been in the range of. So yeah, it's on its way.
Yeah, just basically just be glad it's being sold separately, essentially. Also with it, I mean, for example, like I said, I've got my converted one. Like I've mentioned before, I'm subscribed to the Mortal Realms thing, which. I think I've done the extra subscription, whether it's called the premium one, which means that I pay an extra £2 per issue. But eventually, I'm going to get a Flesh Eater Court bundle, and it's going to include an Arch-Regent because I really, even just for play testing, I really want to try out 2 Arch-Regents on a list because that's 40 Ghouls.
The list I run, so I'll run you through my 2K list because then it will lead me on to Ghouls, which I'll talk about next. So I run 2 Aberrant Ghoul Kings on Terrorgeists, 2 Arch-Regents, 60 Ghouls, the Chalice of Yushorn, and Quicksilver Swords, and that is bang on 2K. With other buffs, every single unit in the army hurts. Everything is a threat, and that's what's nice about the Flesh Eaters. Every unit can be this threat. As I was saying about people bringing armies of horrors, I'm not a fan of horrors. I think you like horrors and flayers a lot more than me, but they can be buffed a lot more as well. I just
say with that, the reason I like horrors and flayers is purely because, like I say, essentially I've been playing the army a lot longer, and back then the Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragon were good, but they weren't the workhorses of the army. So it's a little bit like, back in my day, the horrors and the flares were a lot more needed for the army. And then like a younger generation saying to an older generation, that's great, but we have cars now, so the horses aren't really the best mode of transport. So my opinion with flares and horrors, let me start with flares first, because I own about 27 of them. And I still like them. I think they're solid. They have lots of attacks. They can do mortal wounds. They're fast. They can fly. And obviously they can regenerate their models as well as a lot of the units can. However, the problem I have with horrors and flayers is their bases are too big. And that sounds like a very particular thing to complain about. But the thing is, when you compare, I think a unit of flayers 170 points was the same as a unit of Moser Guard, I believe, from the Deepkin. And if I was to compare a unit of 3 of those and a unit of 3 of those, I'd take the Moser Guard all day long. And you could say, yeah, but the point cost of the flayers is all considered around being able to bring the flayers back. Yeah, but still, it's nothing to do with that. It's the size of the bases, which means it's hard for the flayers. They can fly over things, but it's hard for them to be able to get in between screens, all this sort of stuff, where they sort of need to be able to get to. I sometimes run units of 12 of them, which is a massive unit, but that's essentially so they never die. But I have run smaller units, and I have heard some people say the idea of flares is you run them up forward, they attack the enemy, then they retreat, you heal them for a turn, then you send them back forward, and then they charge and attack the enemy again. Well, it sounds, like, attack and retreat strategy, which, maybe does work, and I've tried a little bit, but, you're missing out, like, on 2 turns, getting them to retreat out of bloody combat and then have to charge back in again after spending a turn reviving. So that's my problem with flayers. But like I say, I have been playing them for like 4 years. I have gone to tournaments with, and I've taken like 21 flayers. So I do like them because, like, for all the love I've basically put into them in tournaments. Cryptorers, it's one of those where at first, back in the day, Cryptorers and flayers were the same points. Right. Now, flayers are 40 points more than Cryptorers. Flayers went up by 10 points and Cryptorers went down by 30. Cryptorers are clearly not as good on paper as Crypt Flayers, but they are cheaper, like I've just mentioned. And Cryptorers essentially are your horde killers, because they have
3.
Is it 3 attacks?
3 attacks.
Fantastic. I was going to say 2, but 3. I'll try, because there's so many spells that give them extra attacks. It's hard to remember, because what you read on paper is generally not what you're going to be rolling, which is a good thing. So 3 attacks. 4s, 3s, no rend, 2 damage. If they get a 6 to wound, it's 6 damage. If they're wholly within, is it
3 damage. It's 3 damage, not 6 damage.
Did I say 6? Sorry,
Yeah, you said 6.
I've got that bloody Terrorgeist in my head.
They are essentially mini foot-based Terrorgeists.
Yeah, kind of. And if you've got a abhorrent Ghoul King or Arch-Regent within, what's range?
18. Wholly within 18.
Wholly within 18, you get to read all failed hit rolls for the king. Is that what the ability is called or something?
Chosen of the king, yeah.
Chosen of the king. Half right every time. So, because if you half 6, it's free. But, so, that is why they are great at taking out hordes, yeah? They don't have a good save. Don't attack Mortek Guard with them, essentially. And flayers, with their mortal wounding potential, because when they get a 6 to hit, they do a mortal wound to the enemy. They make 4 attacks. But that mortal wound, the attack sequence doesn't end. You still roll to try and do a normal wound against the enemy as well. Technically, the mortal wound's just an addition. So they have 2 very different rolls. One against elites, one against hordes. However, because of the flayers, because they make so many attacks and they've got a -1 rend, they're not bad at taking down hordes either. Going back to the horrors, it's even hard attacking an enemy unit with a 4-up save, because, like, I don't know, I've done it when, like, I don't know, you give the enemy, let's say a modest, like 8 dice to save, and they're saving on 4s, and they get like 6 4s out of 2, which I know is a very good average, but let's just say they get it, and you just go like, they've just saved themselves out of like, what's that, out of like 8 damage essentially, and it's just like it's just so annoying, especially if you get like, right, if you say to them, right, okay, you've got 4 dice here which are going to do 3 damage instead of 2, and the enemy rolls them and go, yeah, I saved them, and you just think, that's it. And that is what starts to make them not as reliable.
The -1 rend makes a big difference.
Exactly. And I would say that saves, since 2nd edition, which I've said for a while now, saves have generally across the board not been as good. If you take out specific examples like Petrified Elite, because ever since Mystic Shield changed, ever since Mystic Shield went from +1 to save to reroll failed save rolls of 1, that meant that saves naturally across the board were not as good. However, I suppose that can be countered now, because you can say, again, Petrified Elite, and you can say, yeah, but that's only 1 army. Yeah, but if you see how many people are playing that army at tournaments, it's to the point where I was going to take it to some tournaments coming up, but I'm not going to, because it's just a copy and paste army. But so that's, I think I sort of I was going to say summarise, but I think I was talking about a bit in depth of the difference between flayers and horrors. Again, if you want more details on that, I have done like quite long videos on each unit, but for me it all comes down to the size of the base. Horrors are, I will say one last thing about horrors, I haven't really ran them for a little while now. I don't think I've ran them since they've been 130 points, and I would be tempted to run them now to see how, because they are significantly cheaper, just to see how they do. Because when you do send them, I'm talking about, I've been saying when they go against 4-up saves and 3-up saves, but when you do send them up against things with a 6-up save, they can really cause a lot of pain. And yes, if you charge, I don't know, a unit of, let's just say, 60 models, yeah? Basic Ghoul stuff. They charge in, they do a bunch of damage, and then obviously you generally don't have to worry about Battle Shock because the enemy's just going to go, I'm going to Inspire and Presence them, so they're going to do Battle Shock. You still made the enemy spend a command point. And you could make them do that even with just a unit of 3 can do some damage.
And they also heal a wound a turn as well, which is nice.
Yeah, they've got the raw blood, haven't they? What I would say with those units of Horrors and Flayers, people say that units of 6 are big enough, and it's a lot easier to maneuver the board with 6, and 6 can do quite a bit of damage. But I always go for my kiddie unit. I will always go a unit of 9, maybe 12, and that some people say that's too much, but it's just so that unit basically never disappears.
Yeah,
a unit of 9 you can wipe out in a turn. Especially now, there's definitely things in the game that can wipe out a unit of 9, maybe even a unit of 12, but the enemy would have to focus fire on it so much that they're not focusing on your other couple of Terrorgeists that are running around.
Would it not be better to run 3 units just next to each other? Because then that's 3 units healing a wound a turn, so that's essentially 2 wounds a turn extra healed.
I know what you're saying, but the enemy will just focus fire on 1 unit and wipe it out. or 2. I mean, you could say, like, well, then they might overkill that unit, which they could have, which if it was 1 big unit, the damage would have carried through. But from my experience, I would say, like I said, I'm going to say back in the day again, like when I was going to like tournaments of like over 100 people and there's only like 2 or 3 Flesh-Eater Court players there, you could definitely get away with doing that sort of stuff. And then you'd go, you would have explained it to your opponent like a good player. You would have said to your opponent, this is what my army does. But then they forget halfway during the game and you go, right, okay, I'm going to roll to bring back my flares. And then your opponent go, oh, I forgot you could do that, bollocks. These days, pretty much everyone has played against Flesh-Eater Courts and everyone knows their little tricks and their dirty secrets. So you can't really
do the sneaky tactics.
Exactly. The enemy knows. To be honest, if you take Horrors, the enemy may be surprised and you may get them off guard. If they see your army and they don't see a single Terrorgeist in it, then maybe you can play a few dirty tricks, but I don't know. I think with the book there's more to it than just the Terrorgeist. The Terrorgeist is fantastic, and I would always say, I'd say even just have one, but like I was mentioning, the first tournament I went to at the end of last year, I only had one and wasn't enough. Trust me, when 12 eels attack 1 Terrorgeist, and it doesn't have the double gang of cloak, too late. Yeah, that's just the charge phase. I
think that moves us nicely onto other units in the army, just because you were talking about, it's not just Terrorgeists. And I want to talk about Ghouls, because I really like the Ghouls. I think the Ghouls are really strong.
And I'll just say before you start that, because the Terrorgeists are amazing, and they can, most objectives in the game, you tag and grab them, so when you control the objective, you can then bugger off until the enemy puts a model on there. But the Terrorgeists don't really want to be sitting on objectives, do they? Units of Ghouls are quite good for that.
Ghouls can be even more terrifying than a Terrorgeist if buffed right.
Yeah.
You can get like squads of 20 Ghouls making hundreds of attacks. Literally, I've done this in games, making hundreds of attacks with 20 Ghouls. And it's crazy how strong they get. So let's say you have a squad of 20, 2 attacks each, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, 1 damage. Nothing special. Until, let's say you've got an Aberrant within 18 inches, and as I said, it's a squad of 20, so that makes it 3 attacks and re-rolling hit rolls of 1. So that's suddenly a lot stronger. This Aberrant is an Arch-Regent. He then adds D3 attacks. That's now 6 attacks. There's another thing which you can use to give them another attack. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
What are the ones you said so far?
So just from having an Arch-Regent within 18, it using its spell, and then being 3 attacks for 20. What's the other thing that can get...
Abhorrent Ghoul King is an extra attack.
I'm guessing that's what I'm thinking of.
And then they've got their Grand Court, which I don't know if that gives them anything extra.
Yeah,
I'll be honest, guys. If you listen to this, I don't actually have the book with me. I know quite a lot about Flesh Eater Court, so I'm just going off the top of my head for all this stuff. But I am generally accurate. I will not make stuff up. I'll just get the book out right now. Monty actually has 2 Flesh Eater Court books. He likes them so much. And I opted to spend the same amount of money and get one book, which is the collector's edition.
So their court is the Morgan, and what this is when a friendly surf unit is destroyed, you can roll a dice on a 4+. A new unit identical to that one is set up within 6 inches of the table edge and more than 9 inches from enemy units. So that essentially gives you infinite ghouls.
Yeah. Just make sure you have a hero.
Yeah, so there's a way you could get these to 7 attacks, and then you Feeding Frenzy them, and then that's 14 attacks each. 14 times 20. And suddenly, that is a lot of attacks. That's 280 attacks from 20 ghouls.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you think, okay, well, they're 1 wound each. I'll kill them really easily. I run them next to a Chalice of Yushorm, which is one of the Flesh Eater's endless spells. And essentially, for every model that dies within, I think it's 12 inches of this, at the end of that turn, you roll a dice. On a 4+, you can either heal a wound to a unit or return a model of 1 wound to that unit. So these, if you're running them against any sort of Horde army, run these into the Horde, and this unit will not die. It's going to keep healing. Because if it's your models dying, their models dying, it doesn't matter. Any models, and you can heal models to this. As long as there's still 1 ghoul left, you could heal up to 20 back. And yeah, it's so many attacks. And as I run 2 Arch-Regents, well, I can't do the same spell twice, but between this and Terrorgeists, I could buff either one to be deadly. And if I'm running them all up the board, you can't just split your fire, because both of them have a lot of healing. So you need to decide to kill one. And that means the other one can get up, and then I can heal that one and buff that one, and then that one's doing tons of attacks and tons of damage, whether that's 20 ghouls or a Terrorgeist. And so that's why I take 3 units of 20 ghouls. And on top of this, as we said earlier, the Arch-Regent, each of them can summon 20 ghouls. So that's maybe 60 ghouls run up the board, along with another 40 that have just teleported in out of nowhere. That's 100 ghouls in their front lines. So if I then buff some of these, then there's a super buff squad of ghouls. And you can see where it sort of domino effects.
And I was just going to say, because that's really good. They don't have any rend, which is their weakness. But if they did have rend, they'd be too good, really, wouldn't they? At the end of the day.
When you've got 280 attacks.
Yeah. And did you say that if they're in range of a abhorrent, they get to reroll 1s?
Reroll all 1s to hit, yeah.
Yeah. And then if you're... I think if you're... I'm just trying to think. They have something similar like that in their Grand Court. I'm just getting up now. What do they have?
Reroll hit rolls of 1 for this general whilst it's within 12 inches of these.
So the general, okay.
So you can buff the general for being within range of them as well, so they buff each other.
Cool. That's good. And also, if the little courtier for the ghouls kills something, while it is wholly within 16 inches of that ghoul unit, is going to get +1 to its attack. But that will never happen, because you will never attack with this little guy 9 out of 10 times. before you attack with the Ghoul unit, which happens to be wholly within 16 inches.
I think that might have been the other thing I was thinking of, because the Courtier can.
Yeah, but
Is that was the other attack?
it's very situational. Like,
Um, yeah, and when that kills something, you add one to the attacks as well. So between that ability, if you kill something with a Courtier, oh no, I'm just misreading abilities, but ignore me.
if you kill something with the Crypt Courtier, and that Crypt Courtier is wholly within 16 inches of that Crypt Ghoul unit, that Crypt Ghoul unit gets +1 to its attacks for that turn.
Yeah,
But you're not going to be attacking that Courtier 9 out of 10 times for the Ghouls. Because whatever in combat with the Ghouls will then kill the Ghouls before you attack, and then the extra attack has been pointless. What I was going to say is something we've mentioned quite a bit, and non-stop repeat: the Ferocious Hunger, the D3 extra attacks, and all the other ways to get extra attacks for Flesh Eater Courts. And that really comes into a lot of the synergy for Flesh Eater Courts to increase their offensive output. Lies in spells, by it be extra attacks, or by making units be able to move faster, be able to run in charge, be able to fly, those sorts of things, all relies on spells. And traditionally, your wizards aren't going to get any pluses to cast unless there are some options. So what I did, because I didn't take a Grand Court, like I said, for my tournament list, that meant I could pick my command trait and artifact, which some of the ones you get from Grand Courts are good, but for me, what that allowed me to do is go for, I believe it's along the lines of Dark Wizardry, for a command trait that allowed my Arch-Regent get +1 to cast. I then also gave him a Bellwind Vortex, so that meant that extended his range of his spells, because a lot of the Flesh Eater Court spells are wholly within blah blah range, and a lot of them, to be fair, are wholly within 24 inches, so now that's wholly within 30 inches. He could cast an extra spell, which was great, because now that's a level 3 wizard, which we said he's brought on 20 ghouls, so he's cost me 40 points for a level 3 wizard. Oh, the Bellwind Vortex at 90 points, not a lot, or 80. But what I would also do is I would take a Corpse Cart. So I'd ally in a Corpse Cart for 80 points, I believe, and that gave all my Death Wizards, so my Flesh Eater Court Wizards, that were within 18 inches of the Corpse Cart, which were the 2 Terrorgeists with the Ghouls on top, and the Zombie Dragon, the Ghoul on top, and my Arch-Regent. All 4 of them got +1 to cast. So that meant my Arch-Regent, which I needed to cast 3 very important spells, or most of the time 2 important spells, was getting +2 to cast. Quite often, how I would deploy my deployment zone in the territory, if I had Arcane in my territory, you can bet your arse he'll be deployed next to that. So when it's on the Bellwind Vortex, he's also getting +1 from that. So in some games, he was getting +3 to cast to get those really needed spells off. Also on the Bellwind Vortex, he had a 3-up save. So you can make. You don't get any generic ways to give you pluses to cast. Like if you read their War Scroll, there's nothing that says that, but there are ways you can do it within relative ease. Like just give it that command trait, chuck in a Corpse Cart for 80 points, and you're +2 to cast. If you wanted to, the only reason I didn't give him the artifact to give him +1 to cast as well is because I went for the double Gale Cloak for my Terrorgeist. But if I didn't do that, I could give him +1 for the command trait, +1 for the artifact, +1 for the Corpse Cart, so +3 to cast, +4 with his next 2 terrain, which at that point, if you really wanted to, you're competing with Nagash.
Yeah, I mean, I think the artifacts generally, none of their artifacts jump out as crazy good, because they have specific artifacts for the Aberrants and specific artifacts for the Courtiers. I'm always taking Aberrants because of Arch-Regents, so and Terrorgeist, I'm always going to be taking the Aberrant stuff. I mentioned earlier the command trait I tend to take, which on a hit roll of 6 makes it 2 attacks. That's just because the Terrorgeists, it can double their attacks. Whilst both of them don't become the 6 mortal wounds, the first one does, and you still have the potential for another d6 wounds, which is, the attack essentially becomes 6 plus potentially d6, which is crazy damage.
So if you get a 6 to hit, do you get an extra attack or do you get an extra wound roll?
So it's if the unmodified hit roll for an attack made by this general is 6, that attack inflicts 2 hits. As far as I know, only one of those hits counts as the rolled 6, which is the 6 mortal wounds, and the other one you still have to make a wound and a saving roll for.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'll say that just sounds too powerful.
That's
especially if you can be making like 12 attacks with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah. So, sorry,
we've only talked about the Terrorgeist's more attack. Like, it's got a bunch of other attacks too.
Oh yeah,
it's got claw attacks. It's got other attacks as well. We've only been talking about its more attack.
And like I say, if you want to know more about those attacks, you can check out on that video where I do an extensive review on the thing. But essentially, the guy on top's making 5 alright attacks, and then its claws can do D3 damage. It's so if you fail with the more, then it's not the end of the world. What I like to do all the attacks first and then the more. I like to save that to the end because that's almost a guaranteed. If I'm sometimes like I say, making 12 attacks with the more, it's very specific. You're spending command point or whatever to get the feeding frenzy. You've managed to give it an extra 3 attacks, which is hard enough on its own. But if you do get those 12 attacks off, you're gonna. It's almost guaranteed to get 2 6s, and that's not even including the rerolls to hit. And it's just like you're guaranteed to do like 12 more wounds, which is great, really. And something else to note about the army is when you're building your army list, because we're talking about chucking 2 Terrorgeists, and then I'm saying if you want flares, take a unit of 9 is great, all those sorts of things. Then suddenly, and with the Arch-Regents, and suddenly go, hang on, I only have like 150 points left here. So you can go through your points quite quickly when you're building a list. What I would say to bear in mind is this is a habit I had to get out of because I'm used to playing this army from back in the day, and that was like I've always got to when I have my flares, so I've always got to have their hero, and then I've always got to have 2 Vargulfs in the army to bring all the models back. Now these days, in the list that I told you about, which included like I say 2 Ghoul Kings and Terrorgeist, a Ghoul King and Zombie Dragon, and an Arch-Regent, I only brought my minimum 3 units of 10 ghouls just because, if I needed more heroes, if I needed courtiers, I go, Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon, you're going to bring on a Vargulf. If I really needed another one, I would say to my Arch-Regent, you're not going to bring on your 20 ghouls, you're going to bring on another Vargulf. You can be situational. If I need some rapid fast units, and the Terrorgeist are bogged down and need to focus on what they're doing, my Terrorgeist will summon on 2 units for 3 crit flares. And suddenly, and that is going to cost you a command point every time, but because I didn't go over Grand Court and I've got Feast Day, I can generally afford to spend that 1 command point that turn to bring on a unit. I know, like I said earlier, I could use it to partner and attack the other Terrorgeist, but like we say, this game's all about movement, and as good as the Terrorgeists are, they can only be at one place at one time. So, when you're building your list, just remember, when you build your 2,000 point list, during the game, that's not the only units you're going to have in your army. Your army is going to increase in size. So you can make up for, when you're building your list, and you think, this is a bit too heavy-sided on just power output, and there's no real anvil to it, or no, units that hold things, that happens throughout the game. I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah, and especially if you're playing, what was it? Is it Morgaunt, where if a unit of serfs die, you can just potentially bring it back. You're going to have a wave of units. But yeah, I was just talking about artifacts as well. The artifact I take is if the signet of the first court, which if the unmodified wound roll for attack made by the bearer is a 6, add 1 to damage. It's a simple thing. Just a lot of the others are not really my sort of thing, or once per battle things, which I don't really like.
It depends on that. I mean, if also just to say, if you used to play fleshier courts like I did back in the day, and you stop playing them, you sold them, but then you want to get back into them, you're sort of learning how they've changed. One of the good artifacts there was back in the day was a way to make the Terrorgeist make enemy units within, I think, like 6 inches of it, -2 bravery, because then you're like, and then I hit them with the scream, and then that's going to make my flayers more effective with their scream. It could work really well. From my experience these days, like we've said, most armies' bravery is pretty solid, and when armies get updated, their bravery tends to get a bit better. Like Slaves of Darkness, pretty much all of their army got bumped up 1 bravery, and that makes a huge difference. So just like we mentioned earlier, don't try and focus on doing mortal wounds to your enemy because of their bravery. Yeah, sure, you might go against a Skaven army or Gloomspite Gitz army, but that's just wishful thinking, really, isn't it, at the end? And if you do, well done, because you're going to have Terrorgeist in your army anyway. So, and like we're saying, what you've been saying, really, Monty, about taking the serfs, the Crypt Ghouls. With them, it's like, they chuck loads of attacks, and so they're going to kill anything that doesn't have a good save. But you're going to have a Terrorgeist in your list, at least 1, probably 2. So those 2 things can go after what's got a good save.
Yeah, we've also been talking a lot about Feast Day, and if you don't take a Grand Court. We haven't really touched on the Grand Courts themselves. We talked about Morgan, which is all about buffing the serfs. We talked about that one. And another notable one is Gristlegore.
Yes, sorry.
Which we briefly mentioned, I think.
A lot of people talk about it.
Yeah, you can take Terrorgeists without the Aberrant Ghoul King on them as battle line, and it's based around buffing this sort of thing. And it's got the same sort of ability of monster that hits on a 6 makes 2 attacks instead of 1, so it's got that sort of mechanic.
One that I like to take is or it did take quite a bit, was Blisterkin, which was the Grand Court, which basically the lore behind it is the Grand Court is in the realm of Haish, where the burning sun basically makes all their skin blister, but it's quite a different approach to Gristlegore, so it's not really monster heavy, but it's flare heavy, basically. And what you get to do, you get to add 2 to movement characteristic for your entire army, which in a game all about movement, suddenly your ghouls are moving 8 inches. Plus a run or a charge, whatever they need. There's ways for you to teleport your units about in the army. In your hero phase, roll a dice if your general's still on the battlefield. On a 4+, you get an additional command point, which we talked about how important Feeding Frenzy is. So any way to get more command points in this army, sometimes just starting 50 points down to get that command point is it's worth it. And then ways for the enemy to like -1 to hit you if they're within range 6 inches, wholly within 6 inches of a bearer of this artifact. Which some things aren't the best, but for me, just that extra +2 to movement is great. And like you said, with the Gristlegore one, the Royal Terrorgeist and the Royal Zombie Dragons became battle line. If you go Blister Skin, your flayers do become battle line.
Would you say any of the Grand Courts are worth it?
So, from my own personal experience, again, that's all I can talk for. Gristlegore, I've heard loads of people say good things about Gristlegore. Not gonna lie, I've never taken it. That's mainly because I don't have those Terrorgeists and stuff without guys on top of them. Blister Skin, I've run it a few times. I do like it. But again, the Grand Courts do force you into a certain way to build the army. Not always a bad thing, but I like to have quite a bit of freedom. Because I might be going like, 3/4 of the stuff you're getting here is great. Yeah, but what about that other quarter you'd rather have? Let's face it. So the artifact, which subtracts 1 for hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons that target a friendly Blister Skin unit wholly within 6 inches of this bearer, I'd rather pick a different artifact. So there are things like that. I think, particularly at the start when Battle Tome comes out, but this one's been out for a little while now, it's coming up to nearly a year, I think you have to be a bit braver to not choose a Grand Court. Because you can go online if you want to and find so many lists for Gristlegore or Blister Skin, which is, I would say, the second most popular one, and then followed by Morgaunt. Or was it Morgant? Morgant, however it's pronounced.
Morgaunt.
There we go.
Yeah.
But I like the freedom you get with not going for Grand Court, just because I like to build lists my own way. But are any of them worth it? I would say yes. I would say Blister Skin, like I say, add 2 to movement is my favourite thing about that. Plus they've got a teleport and shenanigan, which is a longer paragraph, so I'm not going to read it all out. They got that Gristlegore. If you just love the Terrorgeist and the Zombie Dragons, go Gristlegore. Because it's good fun. There's also a battalion that runs well with Gristlegore, because you need those Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragons without a guy on top of them. The one Grand Court we haven't really covered is Hallowmorn, and Hallowmorn is the least popular one, I would say. And that's not because it isn't good. It's just some of the other ones are very good, and this is just okay. And basically, like you said, Serfs, so your Crypt Ghouls, your Knights units, so your Knights, which is keyword as well, are your Horrors and your Flares. And this sort of focuses more on horrors, but like I said, horrors are not the best thing in the army, so that's why this one isn't taken. So if you were to speak to most people about, to answer the question, if you were to speak to most people about Flesh-Eater Courts, they would take you down Gristlegore, Blister Skin, and then, like I said, Morgaunt. They're the 3 options there to sort of take you down. What they probably wouldn't say is try out making your own one yourself. So picking your own artifact and your own command trait. And the big thing about not going for Grand Court is you get to pick what your disillusion is, which is a way for your delusion, which is a way for you to pick a benefit for your army. Which, like Crusader army, it's like add 1 to run and charge rolls for friendly Flesh-Eater Court units, which you're never going to fail a 3-inch charge. It's not amazing, but when you get to ones like Feast Day, which is the best one, you're using Feeding Frenzy free. For me, that plus giving my Arch-Regent plus the cast, which I need his spells to go off, is better than a Grand Court. From my own personal experience, that's what I found. I don't know if you think anything different, Monty. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just feel like, obviously there's the 4 Grand Courts, and each is based around one of the potential unit types. And I just feel like they can be a bit niche. Because even though I like having a lot of ghouls in my army, I wouldn't be a ghoul-focused army. And even the ghoul-focused Grand Court, I just don't quite see the appeal, as opposed to Feast Day is just such a strong delusion. It's, and forcing me to take other command traits and artifacts of powers when you've got things, making those Terrorgeist buffing into 2 hits. I don't know. I think I can see what, particularly Gristlegore, if you want to take a wholly Terrorgeist army. But I think I just struggle to see where I'd use the Grand Courts, because they're very narrow, and the army has to do a lot more things than just one thing, and they only buff one thing.
Yeah, I think it's options, isn't it? So I'm never going to say anything bad about having multiple options, but what I would say as a summarise to include that one is, don't be afraid. People will tell you, go over Grand Court, go this one, it's best. You want Terrorgeist, go Gristlegore. Don't be afraid of experimenting with the artifacts and with the disillusions. And it's not disillusions, it's delusion.
Delusion.
Delusion. There we go. I always get that wrong. But just Feast Day is so good, because when I was going to tournaments and stuff, I heard so many people take Gristlegore and all that. And it's like, and I'm not saying I was the first one to do it, because obviously loads of people were taking Feast Day before I was, but it's just like no one I knew or going to the tournament was taking Feast Day, and I was like, this seems rather good. It's saving me 50 points every turn, essentially. And remember, like we said, command points are great because you can make things parley and attack twice in this army. That is amazing. They're also making you be able to summon, once per game, units onto the board. And sometimes you've really got to decide what is more important. But if you get one of them for free, effectively, then it makes you have to make less decisions, which is which is great.
Well, there's also the Carnal Throne, which we haven't talked about yet. But if you're bringing Arch-Regents and you're using them for their abilities, if you keep them on the Carnal Throne, obviously their ability is only one use, as I mentioned earlier, but it means it's free as well. So you've got Feast Day for free, and then you can summon 20 Ghouls for free, and then you can use your command point to use another Feeding Frenzy. So 2 things are attacking twice, and you've just summoned 20 Ghouls. So the Carnal Throne, which is a terrain piece, also take, obviously, because it's free in the army, you don't need to pay any points for it, and it buffs this. It doesn't really have much use outside of that, because, the other thing it does is slightly decrease bravery of enemy units within.
I don't think I've ever looked that up. But who cares? That's not what it's there for, like you're saying.
Yeah, it gives you these more free command traits. And I'm not sure there's any other ways you can do it, but there's a few ways you can just get free command traits in this army, which is really strong when you're doubling attacks. Command abilities, sorry.
So it's great. It only works for your Abhorrent Ghoul King on foot and your Arch-Regent on foot.
Yeah,
that's the FAQ. That.
Yeah, that is how it is. But normally you'll be running your Terrorgeists up the field, so they won't be within range of it anyway. So.
Yeah. But it's just... I was just going to say, it's just so in case... So if you're wondering, should I keep my Terrorgeist back a turn so he gets to bring on his thing free? You don't have that as an option. So don't worry, send it forward, let it kill things. Don't hold it back.
It's almost like the entire playstyle of this army is designed around you don't have to worry about options, just run up and kill things.
Yeah, right. And the thing is about that, it's a case of... So let's say you're not doing well on the objectives. I don't know, the dice determine how many points you get for when it was burnt, or where the powerful shifting objective landed isn't good for you. At least you've had a good game of slaughtering the enemy. Is it fun for your opponent? Well, I'm not going to answer that question. But what I will say is that when I had games of this with the Terrorgeist, it was either... So I played a 5-game tournament and I won 3 out of 5 games. And the 3 games I won, I smashed my opponent, tabled them, and that's the army, that's not me. That won me those games. Like, I won my objectives and I tabled the enemy. But then the 2 games I lost, I was smashed off the table within a couple of turns. That's because I went against shooting armies that just... If you don't get to them quick enough, I don't know if you've had this in your own experience, but you do not really stand much of a chance. So you either win brilliantly or lose horrendously. But that might just be me. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't really played against any shooting armies, so it's allowed me to run into the melee that I want. I've been lucky with that. Yeah,
because it's... I've played against shooting armies when they fail as a hit, and then you go... And you basically just say to them, it was at this moment that the shooting cast army realised it fucked up. Because those little crossbows aren't so given a Terrorgeist charge. It's like, you charge the bloody long strike crossbows, and then the long strike crossbows like, on a 6-up, you take 2 mortal wounds? And you're just like, cool. And you take the 2 mortal wounds. Cool, that hasn't put me down a bracket. I don't care. I'm healing D3 wounds next time. So...
Yeah, I was about to mention, we haven't said it yet, but the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist can heal D3 wounds. One of the mount traits that you can take is just swap that with a flat 3 wounds a turn. So that's fun as well.
Yeah, it's... It's the thing with the army, it is a solid army. Everything does sort of have a role. Something that we should talk about as well is that if you are going to go like down the courtier route and all that sort of thing, with units, with crypt ghouls, flayers, or horrors, there is the issue of essentially, if you look on the website, okay, like I am now, if you're watching the screen, it's not the most interesting thing, it's just me going over the website essentially. You can see that there are quite a few unit options, but you could go, hang on a second, the Crypt Flayers to buy for £30 for 3 of those looks very similar to the Crypt Infernal Courtier for £30, where I get a Crypt Infernal Courtier, the hero for the Flayers, and 2 Flayers in the background. But to be fair, I've already got 12 Flayers, and that's all I want, so I just want to be able to buy the hero separately, so I wonder where I can find that on the website. Essentially, the hero is made out of exactly the same kit as the standard Flayer, Horror, or Ghoul. So what that means is that you need to be able to buy an odd number of them to be able to make that hero, or just buy one off a friend, something like that, or buy enough boxes like I did, so I could spend a box just to make courtiers. So that is something to understand while doing this army, is that because, like we mentioned earlier, that it's all basically, you could buy the whole army practically in one box, a start collecting box. You are going to have to make your courtiers out of standard models, which can be annoying. Let's just say if you want to take, I don't know, 3 horrors and the horror hero, you're going to need to buy 2 boxes.
I think the one exception to that, because I have a sneaky little conversion which I'm planning here, is the Crypt Ghast Courtier. And now that the Underworld's
Beastgrave box
set for Flesh Eater Course has come out, the Grimwatch, that has some really funky, unique models which can stand out in the army.
And to
just get that.
I was going to say, I've got that, and I haven't built them all yet, but the models are really dynamic. See, you could, to be honest, if you used one of those ghouls as the leader for, as not the leader, but the courtier for a Crypt Ghoul unit, that would look more unique than using the one you're supposed to.
You could, and literally, I'm pretty sure pretty much any single one of those models will work as a courtier.
Yeah, because the standard courtier for the Crypt
He's just a normal ghoul.
I can't remember what's the difference between him and the leader of the unit.
Well,
because that's a Crypt Ghast.
The back.
Well, doesn't the Crypt Ghast have the skull, the skeleton ribcage on the back anyway?
Well, no matter what, you need to build one with a ribcage on its back because you only get 10 bodies in a squad of 10.
Yep, so you need to build it anyway. I remember now, the hero, I believe, has that bone that's ripping flesh off it.
But you get one then without ripping the flesh, and it's just by the Grimwatch.
By Grimwatch, you're going to get a bunch of heroes. If you want to go, whatever it's called, like Morngaunt or whatever it was, Grand Court, there's your answer. And you get some very cool bats as well. They look very old, but very nice at the same time.
And you can also play them in a separate game type.
You can, exactly, which I haven't played that, but I've heard good things. So that sort of like, I would say that thing about the model, it's harder to do that with horrors and flares, but I would say that whole like trying to get the heroes is the most awkward thing about the Flesh Eater Courts, really, to be honest. Apart from that, it's a very super easy army to collect. And moving on to start collecting box. If someone was to ask me how do I start this army, which people have, and I've done a video on that, which again is going to be in the playlist or the link that's in the description. You generally can't go wrong by getting that start collecting box.
You could buy, to be honest, up to 4 of them, and still be fine. Like if Carrion Empire was still around, you could do what I did, which is literally 2 start collecting boxes and 2 of the Carrion Empire halves. But with what's around now, honestly, you could get away with buying anywhere between 2 and 4 of the start collecting boxes. And when the Arch-Regent comes out, buy 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah, exactly. Because I remember when this first came out, like a few years back, like 3 years ago, whenever it was, And I bought this because I love the zombie dragon model and the Terrorgeist model. And then a friend of mine said, like, yeah, but isn't there going to be a point where you don't really want to take that many to a game? And I'm like, yeah, like that happened. And it turns out in the future it encouraged you to take more Terrorgeist to a game. So like, brilliant. It was worth it. And even if you go, yeah, I want to go like really Terrorgeist heavy, so am I ever going to use the Crypt Horrors? The Terrorgeist, if it wants to, can summon the Crypt Horrors with the Crypt Flares on. So you want them in the army as an option. That's the thing about this army. It's not the summoning. I'm not gonna lie. The summoning in this army is very good and very strong. Some people say a bit too good, but I'd say it's very good. It's not like crazy like depravity points where you need to have basically a whole fucking half of another army or Zeech to summon your pink horrors on and all that sort of thing. But you do want to have a bit of a toolbox to take to your games. Because, like, for example, I was just going to say the Arch-Regent, you know how we look at him and we go, well, he's bringing on 20 ghouls, yeah? When you play battle plans like Arcane Places of Power and like Duality of Death, the ones where only your heroes essentially can capture the objectives from memory, suddenly, making an Arch-Regent summon onto a board edge, I had no other heroes nearby to get that objective, it's worth more to me than bringing on 20 ghouls. Even if it just makes the enemy going, oh crap, I have to send something over there to deal with that thing, try and stop it getting the objective. It's it's just an instant like pop. So you don't always have to bring your 20 ghouls. It can be scenario depending what you summon.
Yeah, I don't think we've really talked about the Vargulf itself yet, but we've mentioned it a bunch. So there's the three courtiers which address. There's the three main. Horrors, flayers, and ghouls. The Vargulf is sort of like an umbrella courtier.
Mm-hmm. So,
sort of
in case we
affects them all.
Yeah, and I think we have mentioned this. I bloody well hope so. But essentially, what these courtiers do is they are who brings your knights or your serfs, your horrors, flayers, or ghouls back to the units. Apart from the chalice, these are the main workhorses to do that. And like you say, the Vargulf is like an umbrella, so he can do all of them. He's going to cost you more than any of the other courtiers, but he's worth it because he's not amazing in combat, but he is not particularly bad at combat either. He can chuck out some damage.
And as we were saying about summoning courtiers, you can summon literally any of the courtiers. So you can summon the Vargulf, which would probably be the go-to summoning one, because it's an umbrella.
Points for free, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you can summon any of these with the Arch-Regent.
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't got any like ghouls in your list, really, I'd question if you summon the Ghoul Courtier. But it's, for example, I've got two Vargulfs, but one is currently on a base that's far too big, eating a horse, which was for a scenic base, but since the base rules came into Age of Sigmar, I can't really take that to a tournament. So I only really have one of Vargulf that's on a legal base size, and I would kind of like two, just in case I was playing Arcane Places of Power, something like that, and I was just like, right, in one turn, I've got two Vargulfs that have just come onto the board, I've got more chance of getting the objectives now. Because also these things have got 8 wounds. If they kill something in combat, they heal D3 wounds. They've only got a 5-up save, but the enemy can't just attack it with just a small unit to try and kill it. They are, it's like anything, isn't it? It's a free unit you're bringing onto the board that the enemy's going to have to try and deal with.
Yeah, they can also benefit from acting as bodyguards as well, because they've got Feed on Dark Magic, which what this does is if any aberrant within 18 inches casts a spell and it's not unbound, you re-roll hit rolls for this model until the start of your next hero phase. So they can, they can work well with starting near an aberrant and then running off and coming back, and sort of a similar hit and run tactic like we were talking about with flayers.
Yep.
But they can very easily survive on their own as well, because how many wounds do they have? They got 8 wounds,
and they heal
moving
D3.
10 inches. Yeah, they're strong.
I mean, they've only got 5-up save, so if you go against any Doom Diver catapults with -2 end, it will hurt, and that is from a very personal story. And bloody annoying, those things. So the Vargulf is great. And the one thing I would say, like when you said about we can reroll failed hit rolls, even if you're not using it as a bodyguard approach, When you cast a spell, always, especially if you're taking quite a few Terrorgeist with Ghoul Kings on top, you're making quite a large bubbles of 18 inches for the spells. So always when you cast a spell, have a quick measure to see if the Vargulf's in, and if he is in, put that token down. Because if you don't, it could be something he could have been within 18, but you forgot to check, and then you've kind of missed out a little bit. Or you'll get to the end of the combat phase and go like, oh, he would have been within, I should have checked that to be able to get my rerolls. Because this guy makes 4 attacks, 4s and 3s, -1 rend 2 damage, and then 1 attack which is 3s and 2s, -2 rend and D3 damage, and he'll get to reroll failed hit rolls. I think the claws are 4s to hit, but it may be a 3 to hit.
They're both 3s.
They're both 3, or even better. And reroll and failed hit, which is pretty. And especially the fangs, which are only D3 damage, only 1 attack. But when you're hitting on a 3 reroll and failed hit and wounding on a 2, you're chucking a -2 rend at the enemy.
Yeah, and then you can get adding 2 to the attacks if they're within range of 10 inches, or not within range of 10 inches, within 3 inches of 10 enemy models. So if you're fighting blobs, they'll gain from that.
All I'd say of that is, yeah, it's absolutely true. However, I've been fielding Vargulfs for the last 4 or 5 years, and I have never ever got it within 10 bloody inch. What's the range? 3 inches, isn't it?
3 inches of 10 models.
It's never. It's always like at most been like 7. It needs to be fully surrounded for it to go on. And because I use this thing as a bit of a like counter charge or whatever, I usually I will never charge this into an enemy straight on if they've got a big block, because those big blocks tend to be things like plague monks and stuff. So it would always just charge and just like nip like a corner or just like the side. It'll do a flank charge.
Yeah.
Because this thing is great, because like if you attack a horde of it and the enemy can only get like 4 in range of you, and they're not particularly special against killing things like this, he could easily kill like 5 models. Right, and then like maybe make the enemy unit do a battle shock test, and then maybe they have to do smart. Just basically it can be a pain in the arse, and that's if you're not using it as its role to be able to regenerate models. So yeah, that's the Vargulf Courtier. That's sort of the courtiers we've talked about, sort of summarised, and we sort of talked about the model.
Yeah, I think that's all of the models. It is a small model range. It's literally 5 different kits.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get started with the army.
Yeah,
it's an easy army to just deal with.
And just one quick thing. So we've talked about the chalice, which is good. It can also heal wounds to your zombie dragons and your Terrorgeist. What I'd say, the chalice doesn't really fit in. If you're taking a bunch of flares and horrors, I'd stay clear of the chalice. It's not really for that sort of army. But what are our thoughts on the other 2 spells quickly?
I'm not a fan of the barricade. All it does is slow things down.
There are better spells to do that, really, aren't there?
Yeah, and it doesn't affect death. And due to lots of the meta at the moment, Night Haunter's strong. Obviously, the Ossiarch are strong.
And Flesh-Eater Courts.
Flesh-Eater Courts are strong. So there's a lot of death armies out there. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of armies it doesn't affect.
Yeah,
and those are a lot of the fun. Yeah.
Exactly. And when we always talk about things, certainly I do on this channel, and talk about like what sort of armies you go against, I never presume that you know exactly what army and go, well, I'm going against this. It's a Sigmar, so it doesn't matter that it's not there. I always presume you go into a tournament and it could be 5 random armies you fight against. Because if you go to a tournament these days, and I haven't been for a few months, so I can't say certainly, but I have a bit of an inkling that if you go to a tournament these days and you play 5 games, well, one of those is going to be against someone from the Death Ground Alliance. And I don't mean the Death Ground Alliance allegiance, because if that is the case, then happy days. It doesn't matter that they ignore this. You've already won the game. But good old Team King players. But actually, interesting thing about the Death Ground Alliance. I spoke to a Team King player, and he said it's not the best allegiance, but he has no choice. However, there's the Cloak of Mist and Shadows that lets him teleport out of combat, and he can. It's something along the lines of he can do like I think it just says once per game this guy can teleport out, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't say he can't teleport out of combat. So the enemy will charge you a 30 witch hours and go, cool, I'm going to go over there. There you go. Yeah, bugger. So if you want to just piss someone off, then it could be for you. So yeah, you got the barricade. The horse stampede does do damage to you though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a damaging one.
As a predatory, so the problem I have with this is it can do good potential damage, but I do not want to be in a position where, as a Flesh Eater Court player, not all the time, but you generally want the priority to be able to heal back your wounds, regenerate models, cast more spells. You want the priority in most cases. I don't want to have to be in a position where I go, I kind of want this priority, but I don't want my own spell that I paid points for and casted to put on the table attack me back. So you know what? I'm going to give the enemy the priority just so I can make sure the spell doesn't hurt me. I never want to be in a position like that.
Yeah, it also just doesn't do tons of damage.
It's a cool looking spell.
It's an awesome model. All of the models for them are awesome. Yeah, I picked them up immediately.
That's what I made my corpse cart out of. That's what's dragging my corpse cart, because I think the horses are just so
that's a pretty cool conversion, actually. I'd like to see that.
but yeah.
Yeah, I think that for 50 points, there's better things you can get, whether it's buying another command point, or you can almost afford a Vargulf Courtier just as a support model.
More
if you've got those.
Sorry, just to say, or say you can save 50 points for command point, like you're saying, which is feeding frenzy. One turn you have two Terrorgeist basically for that. The Chalice, War Off, like I said, for Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragons, it's quite good. Is that what we're thinking? Because I did take it when I went to a tournament, but to be honest, there was just every time there was a better spell to cast.
The Chalice I run next to my Ghouls because they die a lot, so that means I'm saving them a lot. It's a blob spell. If there's any sort of blob on the field, I put it near it and I go kill, because it means that I can heal a lot, and whilst I'm in that combat, I essentially can't die because so many models are dying. If there's, if you've got a squad of 41 wound, whatever, if you can tie that down and just fight it, then you're going to be healing so much.
Because at the end of each turn, isn't it?
Not at the end of the round, at the end of each turn.
And
it's any model.
So there's any model that dies within 12 inches of it, roll a dice at the end of your turn. On a 4 you bring back one model, or you heal a wound to one of your friendly units. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it.
What's the range? How close is... So let's say I've got a Terrorgeist. That's
within 24 inches you can cast it.
Within 24 inches, but if I've got a Terrorgeist that's charged into a big Horde unit, you've got this spell next to the Horde unit, the Terrorgeist kills, let's say, 10 enemy models, end of the turn, the Terrorgeist wants to heal back some wounds. How close is he got to be to this Chalice to be able to heal those wounds?
So, yeah, you need to be within 12 inches of the Chalice to heal from it, but you can cast it up to 24 inches away from whatever. So if that's your backline Aberrant Ghoul King casting it up to support troops, then that's good.
And it's if you can see where the clash in the middle, if you like to call it, is going to happen,
you can prepare for it.
You can do it turn one. It's a turn one spell, which is, when you're thinking like, is there anything else I can do? I would love to do this spell, but I'm not close enough to the enemy or something. You can just do it.
Yeah, I mean, because I run between two Arch-Regents and two Terrorgeists, that's 6 spells a turn I can cast. So even if it's in the wrong place, I can just dispel it with one spell and have someone else recast it. No problem.
There we go. And because we've already established you can cast quite a few spells easily in this army, and the enemy might just go, I want to unbind the spell, because it's making you bring back your Ghouls that are healing wounds and your Terrorgeists that are already healing wounds. They might choose to unbind it, and if they do, well, then they're not casting the spell with that unbind. So, and it's not too expensive in points. Are we talking, what's it, 40,
it's
50?
30 points?
30 points.
Is it, or is it 50? It's not expensive, is the point.
Yeah,
it's cheap.
It's cheap as chips, really, isn't it? And that's sort of. I'm just gonna say it's 40 points, so in the middle, so not bad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Bang on.
yeah, so with that, um, sort of brings us to the end. But what I'll say to you is, what are your overall thoughts of the army?
Um, I think it's a fun army. It's you know it's not all about just creating the most meta list, because all lists in theory with this army could be good. So have fun with it. You're always going to have strong units in your army, and yeah, it is a high tier list army as well, but it's fun, and you can just run up the board and kill things. It does fall short on its missiles and its shooting and all of this, but there's not tons of that in Age of Sigmar anyway, so it's not too much of a problem. Just get into melee and kill things.
Exactly, and I'll just say that with this army, if you are listening to us and you're going to take 3 Terrorgeist or something, and you're going to play against Jim, who's a really friendly guy at your local GW, who's not really competitive, don't take the army against him. Like we said, it's a powerful army, and like I say, it's armies where I've been tabled in 2 turns, and I've been playing the army because I've been shot to pieces. But if the enemy doesn't know how to counter it, it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. I just wanted to say that, because then it prevents someone crying in the future.
Don't run 3 Terrorgeists.
Exactly. Don't, just maybe 2, like maybe not always use feeding. But what I should say, one other thing is, if there's someone listening to this video who's still listening towards the end of it, and they're thinking about doing the army, what would you say to them?
Buy the start collecting box. Just start from there. Then buy another and another. The only thing you might start to fall short on from buying start collecting boxes over and over is Ghouls, which you might want to buy 1 or 2 boxes of if you want a high Ghoul army, or even just for reinforcements. Then do that. But once the Arch-Regent's available, buy 1 or 2 of them as well, and you'll be set. You can run any list you want.
Yeah, exactly. There we are. And like I say, if the Arch-Regent is going to be like £25, so that's like £50 for 2 models. Just convert up one of the Cryptoras you're going to have lying around from trying to make a Cryptora hero. Just convert one up to be an Arch-Regent or something. Use your imagination. And if you're still thinking to do the army or not, I'll just tell you, just do it. It's such a fun army. It's like we say, it can be very strong, but also you can have so much fun with the fluff. You can have so much fun with the lore, the story, the narrative behind this army. Like when I've been taking it to tournaments, I've got something called the King's Tasting Menu, which my plan is to be able to kill/eat every unit in the game. And I'm getting through it. I've already got an Archaon and a Scarbrand on it, and a Bloodthirster. A lot round Khorne. That's just what I happen to fight against. Some Scathe and some Plague Monks. Not my favourite to eat, but it's just like a King's Tasting Menu. And if I was bothered enough, I'd get like a quill and some ink and write it like that. But it's just a cool thing. I knew I fought a Bone Splitter guy who had something similar to every monster in the game. So it may take me 10 years, but I'll get there at some point. Right, guys, so like I say, that has been it. So if you have been watching, if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and comment below. That massively does help. It's absolutely free for you guys to do so. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to say a massive shout out to my patrons who do a fantastic job in supporting the channel. There is a new patron who's just signed up, which apologies, can't remember your name at the moment. But when it gets to the next video, which will probably be a shorter video, so probably be a bit better, I'll definitely give you a shout out for sure. And that's it. So I want to thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much for giving your thoughts, everyone.
It's been lovely being here. Thanks.
No worries at all. Okay, guys. So remember, until next time, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.